Okay, the time is now 5:08 and the June 18th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting will come to order. I want to start by saying good evening and welcome to the Policy and Governance Committee meeting. I'm Jonathan Briggs, Chair and member of the board. It brings me great pleasure to welcome everyone to tonight's meeting. I look forward to our work tonight. We will now have introductions of our committee members, starting with board members, then administration staff and board office staff. And we'll end with our board legal counsel. So I will turn it to our committee vice chair, and then we'll go through to other board members.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes, you're muted again though.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ray Rivera Forbes, and I'm the student member of the board. I'm also the vice chair of the Policy and Governance Committee.
Judy? Oh,
hello, everyone. I'm Judy Mickens-Murray, ex officio member of this committee and chair of the Prince George's County School Board.
great. Dr. Miller?
Good afternoon. It's Dr. Miller, member of the Policy and Governance Committee.
Okay, we'll go to administration staff.
Good evening. I'm Robin Welsh, Director of Government Relations, Compliance and Procedures.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
This is Ravel D. Fitzpatrick, he, him, his. I'm the director for the Prince George's County Board of Education. I want to thank everyone for watching tonight.
I'm gonna say now we're just gonna go to board office staff, and I think that'll probably capture Mr. Swift as well. So Cindy.
Hey everyone, Cindy Adlin, Board Office Secretary and supporting staff to the Policy and Governance Committee.
All right, and Mr. Whitley.
Good evening, everyone. Dennis Whitley III. I'm a partner at the law firm of Shipley and Horn, and we are board counsel.
And Mr. Swift, just want to make space if you would like to introduce yourself quickly to the public.
I forgot to unmute. I'm Mike Swift, the parliamentarian.
All right, thank you so much. So we're going to move on to item 1.3, adoption of the meeting agenda. Please note that the following agenda items were from the agenda to allow the committee the opportunity to review further. So this was item 4.3, revised policy 3323, purchasing. Item 6.2, new bylaw, executive session. And then item 6.3, new bylaw, regular board meetings. The question is on adopting the June 18th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda as amended. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The June 18, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting agenda is adopted as amended. We're going to move on to item 1.4, approval of the committee meeting minutes. The question is on approving the June 11th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes, and the June 11th, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting minutes are approved. We're now going to move on to item 2.0, public comment on agenda and non-agenda items. Registered public comment speakers can be live, pre-recorded, using video, audio, or written. And it looks like there are no registered speakers for this evening, but we always do want to say we recognize that it's the end of the school year as of last Thursday, but always welcome community members to come and to provide testimony and insights on any policy procedures or outcomes that we have happening for the school district. So I always want to say that. We're now going to move on to item 4.0, discussion items. There are 4 items for discussion. Each discussion round will last 2.5 minutes. And so we're going to move to the draft school year 2024-2025 work plan. And I'll yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on agenda item 4.1, draft school year work plan.
Good evening. It's this time of the year that in accordance with bylaw 9340 that the policy and governance committee works to put together a plan for next year. So the what the 9340 says is that the superintendent does provide recommendations on different policies for the upcoming school year. So if we can just post that, bring that up, Cindy, and look at it very quickly, and I can talk a little bit about how these policies were chosen for this upcoming school year. And I want to clarify that these are just recommendations for policies. It doesn't mean that we have to do all these policies, because also board members themselves will have recommendations for policies. And we hope if they do, that they will share them with us so that we can incorporate them into the list. And from there, then we will identify what are the priorities and then put them on the schedule for next year. So I will say that in this list, the first list is just policies that are required for either to develop or for now and so one policy, 8100 is placed there. Just I'm going to talk very quickly, but just to point out a couple. 8100 is placed there because we now have a new standing committee, which is the audit committee. And policy 8100 does not address the standing committee, so we need to revise the policy so we can incorporate that. Bullying, harassment, intimidation policy 5143, as well as disabilities issues advisory board policy 1700. Those were two policies that we had requests for this past school year to bring back and discuss. And so Chair Briggs had shared with the requesters that this would be put on the list for this upcoming year. So they're on the list for this upcoming year. And then if you proceed down, we have wellness, nutrition, and physical activity, which we're working on right now. But that policy will eventually come back up for review because in it there is language, which we're going to talk about today, which has a work group that they will have to share the results. And from there, that might be necessary then to revise the policy. As well as artificial intelligence talks about the fact that it needs to be revised every year right now, because that's a brand new subject. Things all the time you hear in the news, things evolving from AI. And so to ensure that our policy is up to date and addresses all the issues that should be addressed, that will be also on the list for next year. And sustainability actually is a policy that it's supposed to be reviewed every 3 years. So that'll be coming up for its review. And then if you proceed down a little bit further, Cindy, thank you. One of the policies we don't have and we really need to have is about the possession and use of alcohol and drugs on school grounds. And that came from a recommendation from Office of General Counsel, as well as there is a Supreme Court case that had to do with the use of social media and personal and electronic devices, and that made it through the Supreme Court this past year. And it has impact both for board members and employees. And so it was the recommendation of Office of the General Counsel that we develop a policy to address that. So to basically safeguard everyone. So that'll be on the list. And then if you proceed a little bit further, you'll see a list. These are all the policies that either were that are coming on the basis of what was passed in the legislature this past year, the 2024 legislative session. So these are bills that require policies or changes in policy that we currently have, so that they are on the list, as well as Title IX. Now this might change because there were two major district court decisions across the country related to the Title IX new regulations, but on August 1st, Title IX is supposed to have the new regulations published and ready to go. So I did include those because it would impact both the policy and then ultimately the AP. So then if you proceed further, the next group is this is actually ones that are being recommended to be rescinded. And they're either like there's one on like transporting cheerleaders to games. That's really not policy material, as well as proms and yearbooks. So those going to be a recommendation to rescind. And then we also have school clubs and organizations and cost estimates of board resolutions, which are none of them are really work. I mean, they're not really something that the Board of Ed, even the school system deals with. So those are 5 that are on the list right now. And these are, and again, I just want to point out they're just recommendations. Then if you go down to component 3, this is actually administrative procedures that have already been sent to different divisions and departments to be developing or updating based on policies that are going through this current year, so that as all our policies are approved, then you'll have all of these APs that reflect what the policy wants to happen. It'll tell you how we're going to go about doing that. So those are all the APs. And then the very last one is a very small list, but it does include some policies related to where we have APs and we think they're important, but we don't have policies to go with them. So, and there really should, like, for example, developing curriculum documents. That's a major job of the school system, and we really should have a policy that would address that. So that is just those are the ones that were included in this. Again, they are recommendations. The ones that relate to the legislation, they're not a choice. We have to do those. But the ones where they actually we have already committed to doing from last year, or else we have policy language already that says we will review within a certain time frame, and next year is that time frame. Those are ones that we would absolutely have to do. I also want to point out that we do have policies that we'll have to finish up from this year, which will move to next year. So we'll have those in the group. And then I would encourage, and I know Chair Briggs does also, that board members need to share any ideas, thoughts of what they would like for policies. At the August meeting, ideally we hope to have a plan and a schedule put together for the committee to hopefully vote on it, or at least review and vote on it by the September meeting. So as we work together, we can get this shaped up to include what it is we need to be, looking at for development for next year.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mrs. Welsh, for that. And just one thing I want to add on there, because we talked about this, is that we really would appreciate board members kind of offering perspective on the policies that are listed. As Mrs. Welsh has already mentioned, the legislative pieces are there, and then we have so many policies that we need to get to that were slated for next year, in addition to the ones we didn't get to this year. So it may be helpful for board members to also look through the list that was just presented and indicate which ones you think are important, which can help us to kind of narrow down on what out of that small group we can choose from. So wanted to flag that, but the floor is now open for any discussion or comments on the presentation. Hearing none. Please be advised that the work plan will be returned to the next P&G meeting. I believe this is going to be for action. This is our last P&G. So when we come back after the school break, we do want to have a developed list. So this will be for actions. Are there any objections to that? Okay, Mrs. Welsh, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the committee on school year 24-25 work plan and bring it back to the next P&G meeting for action. We're now going to move on to item 4.2, update on the attorney.
Excuse me, Board Member Briggs, did you want to bring it forth at the 27th meeting so that you guys can have a plan in place? I mean, if there is no objection from your committee. I mean, it's up to you.
Actually, I don't. I think I'm gonna go with the expertise. I don't know if there's a benefit of having more time, and if there is, then I would probably say let's abstain. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge Cindy.
Okay.
Yes, it will be brought to the board at the, I think is November meeting. That's when the policy and governance is expected to provide the outcomes for the year. But the committee has to take action first for the finalized list.
We need to ratify that list. So I think what she's saying is once we can align it, and it just won't be enough time because this is the last meeting before the break. So it wouldn't likely not time out well. Mrs. Welsh, did you want to add anything?
No, I agree with you. I think that and plus if any other board members do provide, like if they board members tell us which ones they think are more important than other ones, or they provide input on particular policies they think are important, we would want to reflect that also.
Okay.
I can't raise my hand. May I have the floor for a minute?
Yes. Dr. Miller?
I agree with holding off. The only thing about, I know that the Policy and Governance Committee will meet in November. Robin, the bills that are being proposed, or for instance, there's a bill that many board members, as indicated last night, are looking to have rescinded. However, that information has to go into the state before November. Am I correct? Because that's when they have those pre-hearings. So how will we handle, or how can we handle that?
You're talking about legislation, right?
Yes.
That's fine. That, in fact, our office has already started working and planning for next year, and certainly we'll be working with the Policy and Governance Committee to be communicating with legislators, and hopefully this year earlier than what we did last year, so that we can effect some change in the legislation prior to legislation even appearing. So I don't think this policy work will impact that to any real degree.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I think also just I think around that kind of process question, it would likely the legislation would have to be rescinded because it's law, right? So it's like, and it would have to happen after the legislative session. That would happen anyway. So we'd have to abide by whatever the law says if we're addressing our policy. Though I do think you bring up a good point around like the timing with our work, and then of course the law. I do want to move on to item 4.2, update on the Attorney General's response, and provide updates and clarity on the Attorney General's response to HB 1079. This is in reference to the chair policy, and granted that we will not have that policy completed by the end of this school year because it needs to go through first reader and second reader. We wanted to provide an alternative, which we've shared. So just want to create space because during our last policy and governance meeting, there was interest in having a second discussion about this. So I know there was more information that was going to be brought by Mr. Whitley and Mrs. Welsh on this specific issue from the Attorney General.
And Chair Briggs, I'm going to defer to Mr. Whitley, since he is your board counsel, and you know, I think it would be appropriate for him to interpret I think Cindy, Cindy, you did post it, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, we can pull it up.
Okay.
And Chairman Briggs, I'm not aware of any additional information other than an email from Tanya Wingfield. And if you want to address that, the parliamentarian can address whether or not she cited the correct section of Robert Rules.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that would just be great for the record if we can just speak to this, because we are missing a committee member, and I want to make sure that before we do any votes, that we're all clear, and this is public information.
Mr. Briggs, I'm going to, if we're going to vote on this 1079, based on what our legal counsel advises us, I'm having an issue because our last meeting, Mr. Whitley misquoted something that the Attorney General does not dictate to this board. He only gave an opinion. And the opinion, and if in fact we don't have a policy in place, then the next thing would be Robert's Rules of Order. And that's why we have a parliamentarian here, and he can correct me on that. So for us to say that we have to abide by an opinion that was issued to us by the Attorney General is incorrect.
Well, and I appreciate your passion. I do want to kind of
No,
follow.
it's not passion. I'm giving facts too. Now,
Well,
maybe because I express it, my expression is my passion for truth and in facts. Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
but let's be very clear. I'm presenting facts, not passion.
Well, and that wasn't a discussion item here, but either way, I appreciate what you're sharing, the context that you've given. I do want to make space for the presentation first, and then we can have questions. So that's the purpose of this time, is to have a discussion about additional questions about the chair policy, and or the decision of the opinion of the Attorney General. So there
And that's what needs to be clear: opinion, not decision.
Yes, but now, Dr. Miller, if you can, I know you can't raise your hand, so if you can request acknowledgement, that would be great. We are going to go to the presentation first, and then we'll make time for questions for committee members after. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Whitley and also to our parliamentarian, Mr. Swift.
So, Mr. Swift, do you want to go ahead and address the response to the email from Tanya Wingfield with reference to Robert's rules?
I didn't see an email from her.
So just for clarity's sake, there was a discussion about, in the absence of us having a clear policy on whether the vice chair would assume the roles and responsibilities of the chair, that instead, if we don't have a policy that guides the board on how to make these decisions, that we should abide by the rules and Robert's Rules of Order, versus the legal opinion of the Attorney General. Did Mr. Whitley, did you want to add to that?
And I believe that Ms. Wingfield cited section 47.23 of Robert's Rules of Order dealing with presidents and vice presidents of the board
Okay.
or of boards.
Yeah, if she's addressing for this particular case, if she's addressing 4723, there's a couple of issues that we need to be aware of. One is that it deals with the vice president assuming some position. And we don't have a vice president or a president. We have a chair and a vice chair. Now, there are differences. The State Board of Education has the president and vice president. The county boards, in this case, Prince George's, does not. But putting that aside, I believe the correct citation should be section 49, paragraph 22, which says, in cases where a board is constituted so that a special portion of its members is chosen periodically, and in this case, it's replaced by HB 1079. So we're losing 4 members of the board. There's a reasonable portion of the board being taken away, not of our choosing. That in that case, it becomes in effect a new board each time this happens. And such a group, somebody won't quit calling me. And in this group, in this case, the group becomes a 10-member board, and therefore they should elect new officers. That's RONR Roberts, section 49, paragraph 22, effective periodic partial change in board members. So if we follow Roberts, and I know the Attorney General, as it's been pointed out, wrote an opinion, and his opinion alluded to the fact that it might be a good idea to hold the election. We're not required to obey him, but Robert's Rules of Order says under these conditions, you should hold an election. Are there any questions?
Yeah, floor is now open for discussion and comments.
I have a question.
All right, Dr. Miller.
Mr. Schmidt said that we should hold elections, and he also explained that we're going to have a new board, which is true. And with that new board, there is going to be a change in leadership, except that you do have leadership already there. Now, Mr. Schmidt also mentioned the difference, that there's a difference in having a president and vice president versus a chair and vice chair. I would think that the decision should be left up to the new board members, whether they want to proceed with a chair. I mean, with the current officer, you do have one officer remaining. With that, and then we already are mandated by policy to have elections in November, in December anyway, and the possibility, well, there is definitely going to be at least one new member based on what happened in the primary. So I'm not so sure why we are spending a lot of time on a temporary situation. You're talking about from July through November or through December, which is what, 6 months? And if you already have officers in place, I just don't understand why we're going back and forth with what the Attorney General has said, and the fact that we don't have a policy in place, and that Robert's Rules of Order does fill in or rule in this particular case. I'm just not understanding why, so much emphasis is being placed on that. And if you're not being honest with your audience and the rest of the board, if in fact you're not satisfied with who would be in place as your chair, say that and then move forward. But, to beat around the bush and use the Attorney General's opinion, and then you have the parliamentarian presenting, options and variables that are being presented relative to the composition of the new board, et cetera. It's just, to me, it's a waste of, public time. If you don't want that, then move forward with the new board, the newly constituted board in July, bringing this issue up and move forward from there. But as well, we're
Dr. Miller, you are at time, so I'm happy to give you a second round, but I do want to just if you had a question, so I want to see if you were posing that to someone specifically, or was that a general statement?
It was a question too. Question also.
Was it to a particular person? Just want to make sure that
anybody who can answer it other than Dennis Whitley.
So what I would say is that I know we had part of how we got here is because we were drafting a policy, and that was based on updates that came from HB 1079 and the fact that we were going to go to a fully elected board. And so that's where that initially started. Robin can definitely fill in the gaps around like what changes we've made up to this point on the chair policy. The kind of higher level piece is that we're not going to have a chair policy finalized by the end of this school year. And so we were trying to identify beyond that, what are alternatives, because all board members aren't on the same page. And so we wanted to provide those alternatives. This really is the purpose of the discussion. There is no one right way, as it's clear. We don't have to follow the opinion of the Attorney General. We don't necessarily have to do what Robert's rule says. And another option is that board members can present a motion for what they feel is the right thing to do. So there are a number of options, but that was the purpose of this discussion. I want to turn it over to
Okay. May I just inject one other thing? Because, we're emphasizing one part of 1079. There's another part of 1079 that needs to be addressed and amended, but you haven't touched on that at all. And that's the part where the state changed the wording from the defense of a board member, legal fees. I'll just use legal fees. And that's very important. But I don't hear, I'm not hearing anything about that. But that's a part of HB 1079. So, it's like you're picking and choosing what you're picking and choosing, as opposed to dealing with the whole bill, where there are issues with the 1079. And there are issues where this board or our legal counsel, as I have interpreted and other board members, have misled us in terms of the terms of or the terminology or the use of 1079 when it comes to legal fees. So I'm just putting it on since we are being recorded, I'm putting on the record that I have some major concerns of how we're nitpicking with this 1079 when you should be addressing the whole bill and those issues that need to be addressed by the state legislature. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Welsh?
So I just wanted to also remind, and we did talk about this a little bit at the last meeting, was the fact that the two choices were to follow the opinion of the Attorney General, or the fact that, and he did say this, or she did say this, I should say, in her opinion, that we do have bylaw 9220 that says in the absence of the chair, the vice chair shall perform the duties ordinarily assigned to the chair. Mm-hmm. And it does say that and the Attorney General did say that that may be what we want to do, is follow that. I remember saying at the last meeting, so the question would be, what does that particular bylaw mean? And maybe there should be conversation among among the committee and the board, and defining what that means by in the absence of the chair. And if in fact that means vacancy for the time period it is, then that would mean then the vice chair would pick up the duties. So I just want to remind everyone about that.
Yeah, and I appreciate that because I think Mrs. Welsh, you kind of going into the nuances of like all the different avenues that we've discussed. And we also talked about there just being a timeline of when we can get this done. We know that we have July 1st or July 2nd where we'll be making a decision. So yes, to your point, we did have those discussions and it was a complex and wasn't just like a singular, this is the thing to do. It was filled in with all those other pieces in there. Mr. Swift, did you have anything else to share? Okay. So I think really, what this discussion is unveiling is that, this really is a decision that the board has to make collectively. And we can likely, I think, Chair Mickens-Murray have that on the agenda, that we would have like a discussion and a proposal that we can make at the next board meeting on the 27th about how the board would want to move forward with the process, whether it is voting or not.
Yes, we did not put that on the agenda for the 27th, but we did schedule a meeting on the 1st for the new constituted board to have that discussion.
And that's what it should be, the new board.
Right, so you do have that meeting scheduled for the 1st.
Okay, great.
July 1st. Okay, very good. Thank you.
All right, so I think we, unless there are any other discussions or comments for this section. Okay. Hearing none, we're going to move on to item 4.4, policy 5121, grading and reporting for elementary and secondary students. So y'all yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the committee with an update on agenda item 4.4, policy 5121, grading and reporting for elementary and secondary students.
Okay, so at the not the last meeting, but the prior meeting, we did review this is when it was first introduced, and we did discuss it in terms of it talks about it just provides this this gives you the idea of what the purpose of the policy is to talk about how grades are supposed to reflect accurate reflection of students' achievement, and students have the opportunity to earn whatever that reflects their ability and demonstrating learning outcomes, and that informing parents about the grading system and how grades are, as well as informing students about parents about their students' grades. And then having this, it says the superintendent will develop a process for changing a student's grade, which includes a timeline of grade changes, names of staff positions authorized to make grade changes, documentation is required to maintain, support final change, auditing of the validity of the grade change each year, and appeal procedures. So, and that was included into this grading thing, because if you look at COMAR talks about both the that is required to have a policy that talks about how you're going to grade your whole grading process, and then you are required to have within that policy address grade changes. So that's why that was all put there. And at the last meeting, a question came up about equity and how this relates to our equity policy. So I did go through our equity policy to see if we have any language that might possibly that could support this. And there is a section that talks about that that PGPS will review and modify their policies, procedures, and practices that may impede equitable access of students to fair discipline, extracurricular activities. So in essence, the equity policy is saying, in all your policies development, you should always be thinking about equity and ensuring that you're addressing it where you can address it. So what I did this is the language I did put in there, because I think it comes down to you definitely want fair grading for everyone, but it also goes down to providing equitable access of students to academic resources and opportunities, educational rigor that they need throughout their educational career to maximize their academic success, and then the fair grading practices. So I did put some equity language in there for that. I think the issue is, like, you can consider all the like factors, like a student might have, let's say, a student come from one family versus another family, but you can't really alter grades on the basis of that. It really has to be on the basis of their performance. But there's nothing, but but in the meantime, though, it is this responsibility of the school system, though, to ensure that every single one of our students, no matter what their situation might be, that they absolutely have equitable opportunities. And that could include possibly interventions. It could include, you know, other additional advancement kinds of things, whatever it may need, whatever the student may need to make their educational experience successful. So that's why I incorporated that language. And certainly if you have other suggestions, I'll be glad to incorporate that too. And that was the only change based on the comments from the last meeting.
Great. Thanks so much, Mrs. Welsh. The floor is now open for discussion and comments. Well, if we can just throw up 2.5 minutes for me really quickly. I just want to first say thank you for adding those changes and wanted to clarify, because I think that the policy will, because the language is so broad, it can address some of those pieces around grading practices that are actually, you know, not being punitive, or that are putting students in positions where maybe they feel that they aren't reflecting their actual potential. So I think that that's one piece that can be implicit in there. And I think another piece is, like, so often we hear about students that leave schools and they go off to colleges and they realize that the education they received wasn't as rigorous or didn't prepare them for college, right? And they had to get remediation. And so I think also hopefully this language in there will make sure that the policy is being in alignment with the standards for college readiness and what that means, and constantly updating. I think you brought up really good points and wanted to clarify why I made that request. And then want to see if there's anyone else that has any other comments before we move.
Can I just say one more thing, Chair Briggs? I went back and I looked at the AP, because we actually have 3 APs that address grading depending on the grade level. And all 3 of them talk about that the categories used to determine student grades must include the following. And one is classwork, one's independent assignments, and one is assessments. So they're not necessarily using homework as a, so I think sometimes when you get into homework, a lot of times that is really dependent on family situations and stuff and whether homework gets done. And that can definitely impede, I think, fairness in the grading process. So I thought that that was a positive thing, as well as there is a lot of language within the AP that talks about every student will have the opportunity to earn grades that reflect his and her ability to demonstrate learning outcomes, and only be graded in accordance with their achievement on materials and information based on specified learning outcomes and approved curriculum. So even within the AP, I felt like it was reflecting, you know, you're looking specifically at you know, what the student is producing and everything in terms of being able to grade the student.
Yeah, that's really great. Vice Chair Rivera Forbes, did you have a question, or do you no longer have it?
I did have a question. I was wondering if you could repeat what you said about homework. My audio cut out.
Oh, I just said that when you look in the AP, they talk about what the grades are based on, and it does not talk about homework. It's classwork, independent assignments, and assessments. And I think that's important from the standpoint of especially for younger children and everything, where, you know, family situations can really impact your ability to complete homework, because oftentimes you need your parents' help to complete the homework. And so I think that that's an important piece in trying to keep the grading as clear, as objective as possible, you know, and not penalizing a student for whatever might be their own personal situation.
Okay, yes, I definitely see that point. I know many teachers have already cut back on homework because of how low the percentage is. Even I myself, in my senior year, never got homework. And my younger sibling, who was in his 6th year of middle school, didn't get homework as well. So you really have more time to do independent learning in classes. So thank you for that.
Yeah, that's great. And I know it also varies, you know, from grade level to grade level. But thanks to your point, classwork is so subjective. So it isn't really a good baseline. Are there other questions or comments? All right. So please be advised that this policy will be, I think we can move it forward for action. So we'll move that forward. Are there any objections to that? Great. Mrs. Welch, please take under advisement the recommendation to make tonight, made tonight by the Committee on Policy 5121 and move it forward for further for action.
Okay.
We're now going to move on to item 4.5, Policy 6153, field trips. I'll yield the floor to Mrs. Welch to provide the committee with an update on agenda item 4.5, Policy 6153, field trips.
So this policy we have not discussed before. This is a revision of the old policy that we had, and you'll see that there's only a couple paragraphs in the old policy that I have incorporated in there. But basically, the policy says that the board does recognize that student field trips can be an integral part of the instructional program. And it allows for educational experiences beyond just the classroom experience. And then it also talks about the opportunity for students to practice self-discipline and consideration of other people and apply information learned in the academic setting. And then the other piece, which is actually a very, very important piece, is that the overall success of any student field trip is dependent upon cooperative planning, a coordinated effort, and clearly identified objectives. And I do know that our schools, if you were to see the field trip process for approval, it's pretty in-depth, and it really has to be planned out quite well. And partly because you don't want to waste instructional time going somewhere where there's no benefit to go. So you want to make sure you're providing an important instructional opportunity for a student, as well as when you think about safety for students, it's critically important that's very well planned in terms of, number of chaperones and coverage, supervision, those types of things. And so then if you scroll down, have a couple definitions, which have to do with the chaperone and then the parents. And we do have an administrative procedure that talks about volunteers, which is 4126.6, and that actually also includes language about the chaperone. So I did mention that. And then the parents, which is a definition we've used repeatedly in a lot of our policies. And then if you scroll down further, Cindy, that's all parents. And then your sponsoring teacher or supervisor, because every school field trip must have either a sponsoring teacher or supervisor for the field trip. And then if you scroll down further, so it talks about the standards, and it says that all field trips have to have a sponsoring teacher and supervisor, and those students should be denied the opportunity to participate in a field trip as a disciplinary consequence unless they've been suspended or expelled, and they definitely should not be denied participation due to financial circumstances. If there's a cost and the parent is not able to do it, then the system has to provide support so that the student can have the opportunity to attend. The other thing is that no student may be denied participation on an educational field trip due to disability. And so that means, whatever the accommodations, modifications are that a student might need on a field trip, that is the school system's responsibility to provide those types of things. There may be, though, situations where a student, depending on their disability, might not be able to tolerate a field trip, but that's very different than where we're not going the extra mile to ensure that all the accommodations are in place so the student will be successful. And then it talks about, again, this is really all the non-discrimination language that all students, regardless of any of their perceived characteristics, absolutely have a right to be on a field trip. And then if you go further down, scrolling down, Cindy, so the superintendent's responsible for establishing guidelines for approving and conducting, as well as canceling student field trips, including student field trips involving foreign travel. And students' trips must receive full approval through the administrative approval process. So then, if you go further down, Cindy, any of our policies that relate to health, safety, and well-being, both the employee code of conduct as well as the student code of conduct, apply on a student field trip, just as they would apply if you were in the school setting. And transportation will either be provided by authorized public carriers, or it could be through the Department of Transportation. And always in advance of the field trip, we need to have written parental or guardian consent. Then the board does not, though, assume any financial liability for any student field trip that if for some reason there had to be a refund or a cancellation. And the school system does reserve the right to cancel a trip at any time to ensure safety of students, employees, or chaperones. I know, just there's been times when, depending on weather conditions and stuff, where a field trip might need to be canceled because it just wouldn't be safe to transport. Or like as you get, like when field trips are going on to the end of the school year, we've had times where, you know, there were really hot days and maybe students wouldn't be able to tolerate that kind of heat if there was an outside trip, things like that, they have to take in consideration. The other piece is that, that if you scroll down further, is that chaperones may not bring other children on a student field trip, and only students who are part of this designated class and group may participate in the student field trip. And that is really important because if you've ever been a teacher, and you've been responsible for supervising all these students when they're out on a field trip somewhere, and depending on the age of the group, the last thing that you need to have are additional students into the group, just because it's a big responsibility, really, to make sure our students are safe and taken care of as they're on these field trips. The other piece is student field trips involving foreign travel. And if you'll scroll down a little bit, Cindy, it says that that basically the same requirements for student field trips are in place for the foreign travel field trips, except that there is a lot more, the approval process goes from the principal to the area associate superintendent, so chief of academics, and then the superintendent. And when the board's it says the board's expectation is that PGCPS staff shall consider the safety and security of students and chaperones in planning and granting approval for foreign travel, and that the staff must consult with the U.S. Department of State website for any travel warnings associated with their destination. And it's expected that the website will be used during planning process and again in the immediate days prior to the departure. So we certainly wouldn't want you know, to be sending a group of students to a country where we find out at the last minute there's some upheaval that could, you know, put our students in jeopardy in terms of safety. And then there should be a pre-travel orientation session scheduled for the parents and chaperones about the travel plans and student behavior expectations, you know, travel, the company trip cancellation policy, availability of travel insurance, all the details, so that the parents of students that are taking a foreign trip they know all the details and know what to expect and what they're required to do. And then there should always be, when you go on a field trip, no matter what the field trip is, a contingency plan for maintaining communication among the participants in case there's any type of emergency on a student field trip. And then the other piece is that the objective of the student field trip must be specifically related to the curriculum and instructional program and to regularly scheduled school-sponsored extracurricular activities or co-curricular activities. So that's critically important, because we don't want classes just going out on field trips for the heck of going on a field trip. It really needs to be related to what's happening in the curriculum. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, it says that student field trips should not adversely disrupt the overall learning environment of the school, and the frequencies of trips shall not negatively impact students participating in regularly scheduled instruction or educational program at the school. And students are not unless it's a curricular type of field trip that is related to curriculum requirements, which are very few of those, but the majority of the field trips, students do not have to go on a field trip if they don't want to. So then they would stay back. And then it's the responsibility of the school to ensure that there's, you've put something together so that student has an appropriate educational experience if they don't go on the trip. And then if they miss any schoolwork while they're on the field trip, the students always provided the opportunity to make up that work. And so then it just says the superintendent's authorized to develop procedures to implement this policy. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thanks so much, Robin. Mrs. Welsh. So the floor is now open for discussion and comments. And board members, please raise your hand and I will recognize you in the order of your raise hand. Unless you
I
cannot.
can't raise my hand.
Can't, just let me know that you'd like to be in queue. So I will go to Chair Mickens-Murray first, and then I'll go to Board Member Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Robin, I appreciate the work that you've done on this policy. We get a lot of concerns from parents that their children are not being allowed to go on the field trip because of some behavior issue or something. What I understood you to say is unless they are suspended or expelled, they can't be excluded.
That's correct.
I think that's a good, I thank you. I appreciate the administration adding, then that's new, correct or not? Is it new?
I think that might be sitting in the AP because, you know, ultimately it is the responsibility. It is the responsibility of the schools, you know, to be working with students, and it might be the student might be bored. That's where you're getting in trouble. So if they go on a field trip, they might actually be engaged, and you know, so that should not be happening, really.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, and then you can check to see if it's included in the AP because I think it's important.
Right.
For kids to not be punished. Sometimes I would see it as being punitive, but it may not be. But it seems like you have a fix in this policy for that. So thank you, appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Dr. Miller.
Thank you. I'd like to also follow up with Robin in terms of that policy. I agree that students should not be eliminated because of behavior at a given time. It should not be punitive. That's it. The trips are supposed to be educational, and that would be denying students that opportunity. If in fact the student has demonstrated a consistent record of I would say adverse behavior, then that's something that I think the school would have a conference with the parent and ask that the parent either accompany them on the trip or something like that. But they cannot punish a kid for something that because of his past behavior. I just wanted to inject that. That's all.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? All right. I did have a comment that I wanted to make because I think you remember that I was the one who had this policy.
You did.
A parent and a teacher reached out to me last year about concerns with the field trip policy. Specifically, what they were saying was that it was like disproportionately fewer field trips after the pandemic than there were before the pandemic because of this administrative process that exists where you have to get a certain amount of students confirmed and families. And then there's like operationally, there's this issue with scheduling the buses. And you can't schedule a bus until you actually have confirmation from, I think, the principal or something like that. So there's this kind of this issue that exists so that therefore teachers can't actually take students on field trips because they don't have enough information to get the bus confirmed in enough time. And then the window closes where they have to get the bus like in 2 weeks or something like that. I have to go back and look at my notes, and I also need to reach out to the parent advocate and the teacher advocate. But I do want to say that I guess at a high level right now, the issue that I have with the policy is the administrative procedure. And I was hoping that we could have some language in there around not adding any undue burden on staff, right? To be able to achieve a field trip. It shouldn't be that, you have to go through all these hoops and hurdles. For sure, it should be aligned with an educational goal, but it shouldn't be so cumbersome that you can't actually achieve a field trip and students aren't able to get those enriching opportunities that are really important for their education.
My hand is up too.
Okay, so for right now, my comment is just to maybe start with like a no undue burden, and then I'm going to go and talk back with those advocates to figure out what additional changes. But I think a lot of it is the administrative procedure, so we want to figure out what I can do in the board policy.
And can I'm sorry, can I just share that the procedure itself hasn't changed much, even
Right.
what you had to do to get a field trip approved prior to COVID. So that process hasn't changed. I will tell you though, that we did get a request about the number of chaperones that are required compared to a ratio of students to chaperones. And part of the issue is that the language in the APs talked about the fact that if you had this many chaperones, then you had to also include that many staff members. So I think where there might have been a reduction in field trips was the burden on the school, number one, to let that many staff go along with all these chaperones. And then on top of that, oftentimes it increased the cost for parents. So we did work on, research actually, and I shared this with PCAC and got feedback from them, as well as looked at a lot of different counties and what they were doing. And we were actually probably the most restrictive of all the school systems. So we did increase that ratio so you could have more students to chaperone. And we took out the language related to the number of, you don't need to have a match in staff, because the schools are already short-staffed. They don't need to be pulling staff out of the building if you already have the chaperones there. So that we did make all those revisions. We're still waiting to get final approval from the Division of School Support so that we can move forward with that AP. Because we think that will probably make a big difference in terms of just the operation for these field trips.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that addition. I still do want to follow up just to make sure that since we are updating it, that there can be just addressing those other issues in case it's a blind spot anyway. And I also may have spoken out of turn. I talked to them a year ago, so it might not have been disproportionate post-COVID. So that may be, you might be exactly right on that part. I want to turn it to Vice Chair Rivera Forbes and then Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Chair Briggs. I just kind of wanted to second to what you were saying. I understand that the process is similar to the one from before, but I think still finding a way to just make it slightly of a less burden, because the program I was in my senior year, the students did have a major role in choosing the field trips we went on and helping our teachers with planning them, which was a nice experience. But the amount of paperwork, the amount of time that had to go into it, and the amount of deadlines you had to meet can become pretty overwhelming. And these are, like I said, field trips right down the road that we could all go to on a Sunday if we wanted to, if that makes sense. So it's just to say in short terms of just making the process easier. I definitely think with the chaperone situation, I like the update there, because again, like I said, it's just very stressful to find so many people to cover a field trip, and it's such a vital experience. It's so important to go on field trips while in school. You really get to see so many different things, and I hope one day PDCPS increases to students being able to go further out of state again, rather than going to see the monument every 10 to 5 years. But I'm sure we'll reach that point someday.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, those are great points. Dr. Miller?
I'd like to comment on or ask you, when you said that the teacher said it was cumbersome, my comment to that is it is cumbersome. And the process and paperwork that's required for teachers to complete can be cumbersome. And as an administrator, my position was that at the beginning of the year, if there were field trips to teachers wanted to go on field trips, there would be a committee that would be provided, and they would arrange transportation and all those other things. Wow, the only thing teachers would really need to do is get the parent permission and chaperones. I don't know what's being done now, but I agree with the comment about it being can be overwhelming for teachers to try to do lesson plans, correct papers, playing field trips. I mean, it's a bit much.
Yeah,
That's it. I just wanted to make that comment.
So I-
And I will share all that information also with the Division of School Support and Leadership, because that is their AP, and suggest to them that you're requesting that they sort of try to streamline it so that it's not as cumbersome.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we can at least have it in our policy so that when we do kind of apply that pressure, we can point to language that says like, hey, we, say it in here, and this is a burden. So that's why we're saying that. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, please be advised that this policy will be returned to the next P&G meeting with further discussion. I think we should have some more discussion. I'd like to add some more points after talking to those advocates. Are there any objections to that? Okay, Mrs. Welch, please take under advisement the recommendations made tonight by the Committee on Policy 6153 and bring it back to the next P&G meeting for further discussion. We're now going to move on to item 5.0, review or action items. There are 7 items for review or action. Each discussion round will last 2.5 minutes. We'll move to item 5.1, policy 0116, wellness, nutrition, and physical activity. The question is on advancing agenda item 5.1, policy 0116, wellness, nutrition, and physical activity to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welch to provide an overview of policy 0116.
So the policy basically was revised to provide a comprehensive approach to promoting student wellness and proper nutrition, regular physical activity, and really it has provided guidelines and practices to support the development of lifelong healthy habits. That it outlines programs and services, initiatives consisting of school health services, health school environment, comprehensive health education, social, emotional, mental health, student support services, physical education and physical activity, nutrition, environment, and services, community and collaboration, and employee wellness. So now I wanna take you to a section in this, because we had a conversation at the last meeting related to possibly having recess at the middle school level, and then we had more conversation, and I'm jumping ahead. If you can scroll down, Cindy, I think I highlighted it so that we could see it. And then there was conversation about but the other piece was, is it really important? Is it really good to have middle schoolers out at recess time, or there are certain things that we might be, concerned about? So if you scroll back up, Cindy, you're going so fast. I want to I put language in. So we talked about possibly keep going up a little bit further to where it says, I think it starts right here. Okay. About having a study group, which would then cause us to come back and look at the policy for next year after the group has met. So I have a study group made up of middle school instructional directors, principals, keep scrolling down, please, and assistant principals, a representative from school health services, representative from academic division, addressing physical education and health education, as well as other content areas as appropriate. Community members and representative from local university and colleges will meet to review and analyze evidence-based research regarding the impact of physical activity on academic achievement and social and emotional wellness of middle school students. The possibility of incorporating recess into the middle school students' day, effective ways of incorporating physical activity and or breaks into the middle school students' school day, and implementation of physically active lessons in middle school classes. And then scroll down, and that was it. So that's for that section. Then also there was a recommendation about the fact that we do have these community-based health centers, and we did not really address that in the policy. So I added all community-based health care clinics located in several PGCS schools shall be operational, available to students. And then telehealth visits shall be made available to students with parental consent. So then if you scroll down a little bit further, Cindy, I think there's a little bit more language in there, maybe not. People disseminate physical, mental, health information, resources to staff periodically. I mean, is there anything else? That might be it. That might be based on, oh, wait, and then the board will review this policy during the 24-25 school year to review the results of the study group and make any appropriate revisions. After the 24-25 school year, the board will review this policy at least every 3 years and make any appropriate, if you scroll down, revisions. So I think that addressed all the recommendations from the last meeting.
Okay, thank you so much, Mrs. Walsh. Are there any objections to advancing policy 0116 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. We're going to move on to item 5.2, policy 2801, safe and supportive schools. The question is on advancing agenda item 5.2, policy 2801, safe and supportive schools to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you so much. It's been moved and seconded. I will now yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of policy 2801.
So it's 2801 is safe and supportive schools. It used to be safety programs, and it was just focused on just having like, if you're doing something, make sure you're safe. Like, let's say you're, I don't know, a classroom thing, making sure you're thinking about all the things that might be unsafe. Like, I don't know, like, I know there's one, I just think we have this AP on sharp knives. And so there's all these things you're not supposed to do so that we don't have accidents. So it's the same idea. So this was expanded, though, to really look at safety and security, because we had nothing that truly did address everything. So it says the key components of the policy include comprehensive safety measures consisting of emergency preparedness, building security, system-wide security related technology measures, and incident reporting, aggressive safety programs to train staff and students on safety hazards and accident injury prevention, supportive school climates involving positive behavior interventions, restorative practices, and mental health services, and collaboration with county agencies such as health, law enforcement, human resources, etc., to provide a safe and supportive learning environment. And then it does emphasize, the policy emphasizes that it is the responsibility of all Prince George's County Public School students, employees, parents, and third parties to contribute to the establishment and maintenance of safe and supportive schools and workplaces. So that's it in a nutshell. But if you scroll down, Cindy, there was a request, I think it came from you, Chair Briggs, related to, can you please just keep going down a little bit further? You'll see it. Keep going. Keep scrolling. It's going to show up soon. Keep going. Can you just keep scrolling, Cindy? It's just, these are all definitions, so we get in the body of the policy, get in the standards. Keep scrolling down further. Keep going. I'll tell you when to stop. Here we go. So there was this language that said, in accordance with Maryland Safe to Learn Act of 2018, all PGBL schools will conduct safety evaluations annually. And I think your question had to do with predictability and making, being prepared for different things that could happen. And so what I said was each school shall identify safety vulnerabilities inside and outside the school building and develop a plan to address those vulnerabilities utilizing school resources. Any concerns that cannot be met with the school's available resource shall be identified in the safety evaluation. And then the superintendent designee shall ensure that each school's safety evaluation is reviewed annually to identify the safety needs of the school and develop a plan. Excuse me a minute. And develop a plan to address the identified safety needs of each school. So that was in an effort to try to be a little bit more proactive for each specific school. And I think if you keep scrolling, Cindy, I think that's it. Yep, that was it.
Great, thanks so much. Are there any objections to advancing policy 2801 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. The remaining agenda items under the category review or action will be considered as a block. So those will be policy item 5.3, policy 3517, security of buildings and grounds, a rescission. Item 5.4, policy 5125, student records, rescission. Item 5.5, policy 5126, student information, rescission. Item 5.6, policy 5132, portable electronic devices in schools, which is also a rescission. So I'm now going to move on to item 5.7, policy 8261, rights and privileges granted by board to student member, which is a rescission. The question is on advancing agenda item 5.3 through 5.7 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. I will now give the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide an overview of agenda items 5.3 through 5.7.
Okay, so each of the policies that are being recommended to be rescinded are really duplications of what we're currently doing. So the security and building and grounds, we have now the new one. Excuse me, yes, that we have the safe and supportive schools, student records, student information. We took each of those policies and put them together as one, as a separate policy. So that would be redundant. The portable electronic devices in the schools, that was combined with social media. And so that we need to rescind this one because we now have one that addresses both the social media and portable electronic devices. And policy 8261 is actually very redundant in relation to bylaw 9271, which talks about student board members. So we don't need to have two policy and a bylaw addressing student board members. So they're basically duplicates, and we just need to rescind them.
Great. Are there any? Okay. So first, are there any objections to advancing agenda items 5.3 through 5.7 to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment? And I want to acknowledge Vice Chair Rivera Forbes in case there's an objection or comment.
Oh, I just had a question.
Go for it.
Okay, my question is for Ms. Welsh. I was wondering which policy was it again? Just making sure I heard the right number.
Oh,
for the student member of the board.
It's policy 8261.
Okay, and you said we're recommending to rescind that
because of the fact that we have bylaw let me see, bylaw 9271 that addresses the similar information. Just pull it up in a minute.
Okay, I'm wondering if bylaw, because for bylaw 9271, I know it mentions like the student member of the board and like exactly the credit they're able to get, but it doesn't really talk about their rights on the board.
Actually, the new bylaw is going to has all your voting rights and everything written into it.
Okay, with the budget and everything except personnel and collective bargaining.
Correct. For some reason I can't see, but we have this on the agenda. For some reason my computer just Cindy, can you go to, because we have that on the agenda, 9271. Can you just pull that up a minute so we can look at it?
Ms. Welsh,
Yes.
may I recognize Mr. Chair?
Yes. Yep. Ms. Wood.
It may be more appropriate for this particular question if you pull up actual 8261 so Rain can see exactly what it says, so it's clear to her what's being rescinded.
I like to see both. Well, I know bylaw 8261, but I would like to see the updated one again.
Okay, so this is the one that we've been working on, and it was actually came out through, it had already gone out for public comment, and it was coming back to move forward for first reader. But it also, if you just proceed, continue through, I mean, these are just the policy statements. Cindy, if you can scroll down a minute. If you look at, we added the good standing language and everything, but if you keep scrolling, so we have the whole information, all the information about the election of student board member, and it lays out all the specifics related to that. And then if you scroll down further, keep going, it then talks about the term of the student board member, and then it talks about rights and privileges of the student board member. So it talks about that, the advisory rights of the student board member and what matters the student board member may vote on, which are where everything except for collective bargaining, teacher and administrative disciplinary actions and other personnel actions. And then if you scroll down a little bit further, it's let's go back up, please. Just a second. It says the student board member shall further have following specific rights: full participation in all discussions of the board convened in regular meetings or work sessions, to offer or second main motions or amendments, indicating expression of being either in the affirmative or negative on any main motion that has been called to question upon the vote being tabulated. And then it also talks about being attending executive session and except for unless it's a hearing on appeals for special ed placements or 6202 appeals and personnel matters. And then if you go further, then it talks about, it's actually much more comprehensive than the policy. It talks about the professional development opportunities. And then we added all the reimbursement language for travel and also professional development opportunities. And then if you scroll down further, it talks about, and there's more specifics about the local mileage-based reimbursement, as well as the college scholarship. And then scroll down a little bit further. That has to do with the college scholarship. So it's actually, includes a lot more information than the policy. What is it, the number? 8261, which only has like a paragraph talks about the rights of the student board member.
I completely understand now. Thank you. I'm
Oh,
wondering, just a quick question. I'm wondering how, and sorry for my background noise, how the campaign funds, are we going to specify that, or are we just going to leave it like that? Because I know there are questions now from our current election that we had where the campaign funds were coming from, who was approving it. And I'm wondering if that should be specified or not in the policy. I didn't catch that till now.
So that's something the committee can decide. It's supposed to come up for discussion in the next section under new business governance for first reader, because I'd also like to get a confirmation from the committee on how much the scholarship's going to be. Because there's no dollar amount put in there too. So Chair Briggs, I don't know if you want to wait till we get to that section over on the new business, or since we're on it already, just have the conversation right now. That, you know, whatever you want to do is fine with me.
I think we should just have it now. Since
Okay. So I guess the first question is in terms of campaign funds, that the language in the policy or the bylaw is really reflecting what was in the law that talked about, I think, the the same amount of money for finance funds for running for a candidate with the last two members. It's supposed to be equal, but doesn't give you an amount. So I don't know how much you want to put in there. And I don't know, Rain, if you want to provide, what do you think, a suggestion of what it might cost? I don't know. And then the other question is about the scholarship, which again, the committee has to do. And at our very long time ago meeting where we addressed this, the question was, well, what's Montgomery County doing? And on their website, they say they provide a $5,000 scholarship for the board member, the student board member.
Yeah, so colleagues, the floor is now open for discussion. Please raise your hand, and I will acknowledge you in the order of your raised hand. Or if you cannot raise your hand, of course, just come off mute and let me know, and I'll put you in queue.
My hand, I'm re-raising my hand.
Okay, so Vice Chair Rivera Forbes.
So yes, I do understand Montgomery County does 5,000, and I would understand if that's more comfortable with our current state for funding. However, I personally think for all the work the student member of the board does, 5,000 isn't really enough for some support towards college, especially considering board member salaries. But like I said, I do understand if that is the main consensus there. I would hope to see some form of scholarship given to future student member of the boards, though.
Mrs. Welsh, I wanted to clarify here because I might have misunderstood. Is this campaign funds or is this
Yes.
college scholarship fund?
No, there's two funds that Rain brought up campaign funds because that has been a question about how much do we pay in campaign funds? And the law just says equal. You pay because usually at the end there's two candidates, so you pay equal amount in campaign funds, but there's no dollar amount. And so that was that. I think that's Rain's question. What is it? And then the other question that has been sitting out there is how much would the scholarship be? And so I was tasked with finding out what Montgomery County does.
Got it.
My first comment was about the scholarship. For the campaign funds, I thought it was clarified in the bill, but I've been told that it wasn't. So I'm at a crossroad there because the student member of the board that previously worked on the bill said it was $500 that should be given for campaign funds.
So, oh, and I want to make sure we have our timer up too. Just so we're being respectful of the members that might have questions. I'm going to recognize myself really quick and just say, I think maybe for the sake of time, it might be helpful, I know that that board members get like a $7,000 kind of spending fee for conferences or other things, separate from the salary that we get. So I'm wondering if like maybe it's a $1,500 campaign fee and then like a $5,500 scholarship, which would be the equivalent of 7,000 that board members would get. And I think 1,500 is like is really more than enough for a campaign for a student member. But that's just my take.
May I make a comment when you're finished?
Yep, Dr. Miller, or I'm going to go to board member or Chair Mickens Murray, and then Dr. Miller, and then perhaps Rivera Forbes.
Well, Dr. Miller may have some insight on this. I was going to ask Robin, Ms. Welsh, what do the other students receive in terms of those dollar amounts? And if I missed it, I'm sorry. And as far as the dollar amount for reimbursables, I think this board could set it at per travel or something. So what are the other jurisdictions doing in that area? Is there something in place someplace?
So as far as the campaign funds, that was new language. I think that came through 1079. And I think it said for the last two candidates, it's equal funding. It did not put a dollar figure there. Okay. I have no idea what other systems are doing. But then for the scholarship, there was I was asked to look in Montgomery County, and they said 5,000. I will say this, that there is language in that the new policy that the one that we've been working on by the bylaw, which actually also talks about reimbursement, I think, for professional development activities, those kinds of things for the student board member.
Yeah, I agree. I accompanied Rain and her grandmother on one trip, and I do know it's not fair to the guardians that we require to come with the students. So we should offset that. I see and I don't want to not take up Dr. Miller's time, and I see the attorney's hand raised. So I just want to make sure that this board needs to put something in place, a dollar amount, a fiscal amount based on something, because it's not fair to our student board member. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Woodley, before I go to Dr. Miller.
Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. It seems like we're mixing issues. There's an issue with the scholarship. There's an issue with reference to campaigning for PGRAS. The two final candidates, they get campaign funds. And then we've brought up a third issue about reimbursables for the board members for other issues. So I just want to make sure that we're discussing right now the scholarship and the reimbursement to the final two members of PGRAS who are running for the student board. Those are the two issues that were in front of the board. I don't believe we were talking about reimbursables for the board members for her professional development or their professional development.
Thank you. Dr. Miller?
I concur with the comment about mixing apples and oranges, the campaign and reimbursables. I also like for it to go on record that the board members, people refer to it as a salary. It is not a salary, it is a stipend. We are part-time members of this system. And to refer to that as a salary is an insult to some of us. So please make note that it's just a stipend that we received in addition to the expense accounts that each board member is allowed. And that is for travel and conferences and registrations. I'm just not clear on where we're going with the, because some of this is new, the student rights. And we don't have much to compare to because there aren't that many boards that give their students the kind of rights that our student board members have exercised. And 1079 did address that for the other student board members in the state. So I think there needs to be more discussion on this in terms of, what 1079 has granted the students and that it should be more specific.
Okay, thank you so much. We're going to go to, I believe, Vice Chair Rivera-Forbes and then Chair Mickens-Murray.
Thank you, Chair Briggs. No insult at all to the board member's stipend, but the student board member is also part-time as well and a full-time student in school, usually a junior or a senior, doing a lot, and some of us cannot maintain a job at all. So it means everything that we're doing and attending board meetings, it usually can go unnoticed. But nevertheless, even though every board member does have a degree already, we're still working just as hard. So I would like to continue advocating on behalf of this. Also, to reiterate, the student member of Prince George's County Board of Education does not have the highest voting rights in the state. And often we say we have really big rights, but the Montgomery County student member of the board has a few more rights. And as we know, the Anne Arundel County student member of the board has full voting rights and is considered a full board member on the board. So I would just like to reiterate those two things. And I would also like to add that the Montgomery County student member of the board does get a $5,000 scholarship alongside their reimbursables. And I'm pretty sure that's not coming out of the $7,000 stipend that was being talked about. So I would just like to put that there. Thank you.
Well, I just have to clarify before I go to Chair Mickens-Murray, but what do you mean by the reimbursables are not coming out of the 7,000? Where would it be coming from? Just want to clarify for her.
So they are coming out of the 7,000, but the 5,000 has been completely set aside for the Montgomery County Student Member Board. So they get that 5,000 in general. That's something that's set aside for them. Their 7,000 is still the same reimbursables they get for their travels back and forth. And also the other statement that was brought up, yes, there are 3 different concerns with the student member of the board. It's the student member of the board's scholarship. It's the student member of the board's campaign funds for the top 2 candidates, which has been written in the bill. And previously, when in the beginning of the year, when we were formerly under the leadership of Chair Fields, it was brought up of how the student member of the board is not given enough compensation for them and their guardians as well. And again, it is required for all student member of the boards to bring a guardian on a conference. You all have attended conferences. You know the pressure of attending one, how much it can cost. Now imagine feeding yourself and an adult. It can be a lot, and you're only getting maybe $35 for a meal a day. So I would just like to put that out there and explain why those three different funds were brought up.
All right, Chair Mickens, Mary, I'm not sure. Well, I want to, before I go to you, because I'm not sure if Ms. Welsh has a helpful
That's
comment.
what I was thinking as well.
Okay.
So, yeah, go to Ms. Welsh. You're muted, Ms. Welsh.
So I just wanted to point out, so that we're clear, we already have language in there that says that we're going to reimburse the person that goes along with the student
Yeah.
member to any
Okay.
functions that they have to transport, and not just reimburse them for travel, but any of the other expenses that they incur, especially when they're out at going to out of town conferences, and they're the adult chaperone that comes along, as long as they provide documentation, as well as then there's language here that also talks about then reimbursing the student board member for any kind of local types of mileage-based reimbursement and using their personal vehicle and other let's see, what in accordance with public reimbursement rates. So we have language in there for reimbursement, like for parking and tolls and everything, but then the other issue is so we are covering that. So we just need to identify what is the scholarship going to be, how much, and then how much is going to be the campaign funds.
Yeah.
Which whatever you decide for the student board member, remember you're going to double it because you're paying also for the other candidate that was running.
Got it. Okay.
And,
Mr. Chair, excuse me, Robin, Mr. Chair, I just want to follow up on what Robin is saying. Let's keep these items separate, because as Robin said, and me when I served as chair, the companion or adult was reimbursed for everything. So I don't know how that became an issue, but the bottom line, the policy is there that the companion or parent or whoever is reimbursed. Now, this issue with the campaign, that's new. And I think we need to keep these separated, because it seems like we're mixing apples and oranges here.
Yep. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Chair Mickens Murray. And Cindy, if we can start the time over.
thank you. I appreciate the fact that you are reimbursing. I did not see anything in any policy that allowed that reimbursement. That is the reason that I think Mr. Fields brought the reimbursement forward to this committee. So I appreciate the movement on that. I do believe if there's a recommendation from the student, our student board member, based on some information that she has as far as the amount for the advertisement and when the two candidates running the campaign money, I think this committee should at least hear it and act on it. And it seems like it was a nominal amount of money. It didn't seem like it was a lot of money. So I appreciate the fact that at least the board is looking out now for the student, and it would be helpful for the new student board member to have some of these things in place when he starts. Thank you.
All right. So I hear, I think, oh, your hand was already down. Yeah. I hear good comments about, this being germane to the campaign as well as to the scholarship. I haven't heard any numbers, so I think I was the only person that presented actual numbers here to this. Dr. Miller said that we should likely look at 1079. But I do want to just make sure that we can move forward, because that was the question on the question posed was what should that value be? Mr. Whitley, before I guess move us forward or see if there's any other questions.
I believe I heard the vice chair say that the campaign contribution should be $500 each. I just wanted to make sure, because I think they said that there were no numbers suggested. So I just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
That's what I heard, and if the board wanted to move on that.
Yep. Yes, that was correct. That she did say that. Vice Chair Rivera Forbes.
Thank you, Chair Briggs. Yes, that was mentioned before. I mentioned it a few times in this meeting that was the discussion that came up when the bill was originally being created. Just to reiterate that. Also, going into reimbursements, I was not aware that it was written into policy, but I am excited that was written there. I know we're talking about something completely separate now, but just to add that in there, it's great to be aware of that. I would say if we're going to also talk about the college fund, if Montgomery County is doing 5,000, then I think that's a good baseline for us to start with as well, just for numbers to be there. Thank you.
Great. And it's good to hear from you because you obviously can bring the real world experience of knowing, right? Like we can say what we think, but you as a student board member are the person who's went through the year of doing this. So you would know best what is a good amount. And it's good to hear that you're saying 5,000 feels right for the scholarship and 500 feels right. So are there any objections? And I think we have that number now. So are there any objections to advancing agenda items 5.3 through 5.7, which 5.7 includes the rights and privileges granted by the board to the student member to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment?
Wait. Yeah.
Okay, hearing none, the motion passes with the additional language and the policy will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to seek public comment. We're now going to move on to item 6.0, new business and governance, and go to item 6.1, bylaws and rules and procedures. The question is on advancing agenda item 6.1 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh and Mr. Swift to speak on agenda item 6.1.
And I need to yield the floor to Mr. Swift so he can talk about the rules and procedures.
Where is it?
And if we can pull it up, Cindy, please.
I guess my question is, what is being advanced to the board?
Robin, I think
I believe he's asking to see the copy of his email that was forwarded to the board for with suggestions.
let's see. Thanks for your patience, everyone. We're just going to pull that information up.
Cindy, it's called Rule of Procedure for the Prince George's County Board of Ed.
Does anyone have the date on when that email was sent? I'm trying to find it.
I have a version, it says version 6/17/24, which is yesterday.
Yeah, and that was what it was.
Mr. Chair, are there any more items that we will need to have a vote on tonight?
We have just a few more. So if you we have a few blocked items that we're gonna do, and then we have about four or five more policies, or 4 more policies.
Will we have to vote on those?
We won't. It would
I'm
just
hard pressed for 7 o'clock tonight.
okay. I think we should be done by then. If we can get through this, we should be fine.
Thank you.
Are we referencing this document?
That's not the one. That looks like it.
Yes.
The other documents explained what was announced by Chairman Briggs at the meeting about rescinding 2 existing bylaws and replacing them with this rules of procedure as opposed to bylaws. And it's set up to have the procedure for conducting business at the meetings, pointing out there are regular meetings, annual meetings, and special meetings. And the regular meetings of the board shall be held at least, and the selection of dates in there are the ones in the existing policies or existing documents. So that was not changed. And letter B, capital B, is the blank days notice, including the agenda, shall be posted on board docs. That's what we do, but what we need is the board eventually, or the committee, can recommend a number of days. The only thing statutes say is reasonable notice, so you can pick the number of days. Second would be the annual meeting, and the annual meeting would be on December, as prescribed by, and it cites the statute that gives it. There's an appendix to this that actually has those statutes, those excerpts, so you can read it. Then it addresses special meetings. They may be called by the chair, excuse me, and called by any 3 members of the board, keeping in mind we now have 10 members. And special meetings will require 72 hours notice, which I think is in the existing documents. And then section 4, the fact that you can hold internet meetings. And finally, the quorum, and the quorum will be the majority of the 10, again, stated by a particular statute, cited here and included in the appendix, the appendices. There are 2. One for open meetings and one for education, division 2. So that it points out that these are not our bylaws, nor are they procedures. They are in fact statute, and that's what they will be. Then the order of business. In the current documents, we refer to the agenda or the agenda format, but it is in fact the order of business. The order being the order in which items will come up under these headings as appropriate. And I followed, I guess, a lot of what we currently have, simply pointing out that after the call to order, roll call, you read the closing statement, close the meeting, go in the back room, do business, recess, come back out to the main room, call to order, opening ceremonies, and roll call again. Adoption of the agenda, approval of the minutes. That's already in the current documents. News break is in there. The rest might change slightly, but they are in general the same thing. There's the report of the chair, the report of the chief executive officer or superintendent, if you wish to use that term, and then reports of committees under which any committee having a report will be placed. So if the governance committee has a report for a particular meeting, it's of course listed on the agenda. Any other committees are also listed under item 12 on the order of business. Then public comment, and then presentations of any kind, meaning, for example, when the organization explained the bell changing schedules and the bus routes and all that stuff, that will be a presentation. So presentations of any kind. Followed by the consent agenda. We have some rules for the consent agenda, but after the consent agenda would be unfinished business. The other documents have a brief explanation of this. Unfinished business is any business that was on the previous meeting's agenda and was not reached because of adjournment. So it must have been on the agenda before and not gotten to in order to be unfinished business. The next one is general orders. General orders are anything that's on the agenda when you start the meeting, that it's already been put on there by the chair or the superintendent, or something that was postponed from a previous meeting to this meeting. After general orders will be new business, meaning the chair asks, is there any new business? Because there ain't no new business on any agenda. Otherwise, it ain't new. And finally, adjourn. If you scroll down to the next page, we explain the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda shall be adopted in gross without discussion. Now, you either vote on them or you pull one. Section 2, on demand of a single member, any item may be pulled from the consent agenda. Section 3, if it's pulled, it goes on under general orders. So on demand of any member, pull it and put it there. Otherwise, whatever's on the consent agenda is simply voted on, period. Limit of discussion, the members' first discussion will be limited to blank. Again, you fill in the minutes. I think now it's 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Whatever the board decides or whatever the committee decides to put in the blank. And the members' second discussion will be, again, whatever the committee or the board decides on. Then votes. An act of the board requires a majority vote of the board as prescribed again by the Maryland statute. And basically it's a majority, meaning a majority of 10 in this case. So it's 6 or more. And votes shall be taken by roll call. Finally, parliamentary authority. The parliamentary authority is Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised. And it says you follow that except for any, obviously, state law, local law, or any rule that the council adopts will take precedence over or outrank Roberts. Excuse me. Are there any questions on this presentation on these rules of procedure?
Thank you so much, Mr. Swift. Mrs. Welsh.
I do have a question related to the order of business, because if you we have actually, the committee has spent a good amount of time discussing all the items that they want in a meeting. And so in looking at what you have listed under order of business, it does not include like the Board of Education's commitment statement. It does have roll call. It doesn't have anything about invitation to participate in prayer or reflection.
Opening ceremonies. Be careful.
Right.
This is an order of business. It is a list of headings. It is not an agenda.
But I'm just wondering from a standpoint of ease for board members' usage of this, if it's possible you could have your order of a business, but under these items, maybe break out what is there, just so that board members know what's included in the order of business.
You have any recommendations of which you would want? And please be careful, because you're leaving the list of headings and starting to add what I will call minutia of what's going to happen at any particular meeting. Every meeting is going to be different. Everybody and his brother is going to have stuff to put on there. The chair does, the superintendent does, Mr. Briggs does. And there's a heading for everything.
Robin, can I suggest where he said that opening ceremonies, you can list those things as possible things that go under opening ceremonies? There may be others. It's not an all-inclusive list, but if it's there, you know, opening ceremonies, including but not limited to, and then the things that we already have on the agenda.
No.
I that's what I was thinking, that we would, that's really what I was suggesting, is that we would list it under there as the possibility of things.
Opening ceremonies is pledging and praying and singing and dancing. I had many clients, some sing, some dance, some recite, some pray. That's their opening ceremonies to whomever they pray or pledge.
The other thing I want to point out is that we do have at the end, and this is something that we actually have this in other policies, that the motion to confirm actions in closed session. So
No.
end of each meeting,
The
that
answer is no, that's not proper. It's been pointed out already, but you can do whatever you want, but it's not proper.
okay.
You do not ratify anything that has already been adopted.
But the law is very clear that you have to, when you're talking about closed meeting session, the actual voting must be done in public session.
Oh, that's whatever the law says is fine. I've read it and I've taken the course and I've got the certificate on the wall. We observe the Open Meetings Act, period.
So we're gonna, so I guess it sounds like what was been presented for item 6.1, we're gonna go with it as is at a high level. We have the flexibility here to add in those additional pieces if we want to. And I know that we've had conversations about some of those pieces in the policy. So I think we can take with that and have a discussion offline about it, just because I know also we have a few committee members that that need to go soon. So I think that this was a really robust conversation. Really appreciate the presentation, the discussion. And now I'm going to ask, are there any objections to advancing agenda item 6.1 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader, with the caveat that we will likely make some changes to the structure? Hearing none, the motion passes. The bylaws and rules of procedures will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. Thank you so much, Mr. Swift and Mrs. Welsh. I'm going to move on now to item 6.4, bylaw 9210, chair. The question is on advancing agenda item 6.4 to the full board with the recommendation to be advertised as first reader. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I second.
Great. It's been moved and seconded. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the public comments responses for agenda item 6.4.
There was only one response for that particular one, and it said government officials are supposed to represent the interests of people they are elected to serve. If a portion of the board so chooses to reflect following Robert's Rules of Order and change bylaw 9210, you will be doing a direct attack to our democracy and not allowing the voters and residents to have representation in the selection of the next board chair. This move will be self-serving and disingenuous to allow certain members of the Board of Education to allow for their person of choice to ascend to the role of chair instead of following Robert's Rules of Order in case of any vacancies in law HB 1079. We the people will be watching, do the right thing. Thank you. That's the only comment.
Okay. Are there any objections to advancing agenda item 6.4 to the full board with the recommendation to be advertised as first reader? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policies will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advertised as first reader. Now,
What is 9210?
That's the chair policy. By law, 9210, chair policy.
What is it? I'm confused. I don't see a 9210.
Mr. Welsh, I'll get it to you offline. I mean, Mr. Welsh, Mr. Swift, I'll get it to you offline.
Yeah, we
Are
can get.
these things going to
Chair.
be renamed, scratch bylaw and insert policy?
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, we are. So we are. We did make that revision at the previous board meeting, so that is in process.
Thank
So
you.
you'll likely hear by law again, but we're clarifying that those will be after that that vote that was approved will be changed.
Housekeeping.
Yeah.
Oh, Mr. Briggs, this is, can you hear me?
Yes.
Mr. Briggs? Would you go back? What are you saying we just voted on? Because
So-
my mic was not on and I was trying to get your attention.
We just voted on moving the chair policy that we've been discussing to be advertised as first reader. That's all we've done.
What's the chair policy you're talking about though?
The chair
Because I thought when at the beginning, there was some question or concern about what you're trying to, what is trying to be accomplished by some, I'll put it that way.
So we already had a chair policy that was being revised, and there was language added to that policy. That policy is not going to be completed by June 30th when we have to vote for a chair. So that policy is still moving through the process and is going for first reader. And so that's what we're voting on. But it will not be approved this school year. It'll be approved next school year at some point. And so right now we're moving that policy forward. So we'll have something that kind of provides direction based on the board's desires.
I got it. Okay, thank you.
We're moving to item 6.5, and this is bylaw 9271, student board member. The question is on advancing agenda item 6.5 to the full board with the recommendation to be advertised as first reader. Is there a second? Is there a second?
I second.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to update the committee on agenda item 6.5.
So we did not receive any comments on 6.5, but just to reiterate, we will incorporate the number of 500 for the for running for the, the cost for running as a candidate, as well as the $5,000 scholarship. We'll put that language in before, so that when it's posted for first reader, it'll have that language in it.
Right. Are there any objections to advancing agenda item 6.5 to the full board with the recommendation to be advertised as first reader? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policies will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advertised as first reader. We're now moving on to item 6.6, policy 4113, community involvement in the principal selection process. The question is on advancing agenda item 6.6 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. Is there a second?
A second.
Is there a second? Dr. Miller, Vice Chair.
I second.
Okay, let's make sure we're all listening in so that we can, because I don't want to make sure we could all get out of here in good enough time. Thank you so much. It's been moved and seconded. I yield the floor to Mrs. Welsh to provide the public comment responses for agenda item 6.6.
So what came in, it came in after the public comment period, but it were two comments that we did receive emails on, which had to do with the fact that they feel like for principal candidates, one of the things that they need to have is training in special education. Because both in terms of in terms of the IEP as well as the 504 plan, and that that would be one of the criteria for when you're interviewing these candidates and identifying whether they meet the criteria. That would be one of the criteria that you'd want to make sure is that they have had special education, compliance, monitoring, family collaboration, all these things in their background in terms of training or experience.
Yes, thank you so much for mentioning that. Are there any objections to advancing agenda item 6.6 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policies will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader.
And you don't want any change then to that policy for any language there based on this comment? I'm just clarifying to make sure.
Yeah. And we still have the second reader. We still have an opportunity, right, when it's brought back.
It won't come back here, but certainly the board has that opportunity to make that change.
No, yeah, I do want to address those comments. I know they came in after the comment period, but I do want to address those comments. And so I actually want to pause on advancing it as first reader because I think those are really important. And they were shared during the Parent and Community Advisory Council meeting, as you know, by really committed parent advocates. And so I think these are, as well as some of the staff members in our schools who actually understand this process very well. So I do want to make sure that we can incorporate some of those pieces in there. So I know that I asked if there are any objections to advancing it. I'm objecting to advancing 6.6 as first reader and would like for it to stay just for further adjustment.
Come back here.
Discussion.
Okay.
So the remaining agenda items under the category new business / governance will be considered as a block. That's item 6.7, policy service animals in schools, item 6.8, policy student information and records, item 6.9, policy 0101, educational equity, policy 6.10, policy 0119, theory of action, policy item 6.11, policy 6161, core curriculum resources, item 6.12, policy 4111, employment, recruitment, rescission. Item 6.13, policy 6180.1, evaluation and selection of classroom instructional materials rescission. And then item 6.14, policy 8371, appointments rescission. Agenda items 6.7 through 6.14 were sent out for public comment. No comments were received. The question is on advancing agenda items 6.7 through 6.14 to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced as first reader. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the motion passes. The policies will be moved to the full board with the recommendation to be advanced to first reader. We're now going to move on to item 7.0, follow-ups and next steps. So item 7.1 is follow-ups, and that will be for this meeting, as well as addressing any planned next policy and governance meetings. So as the next step, the next policy and governance committee meeting will be held in August of 2024. The time and date will be provided on July 1, 2024. The meeting will be virtual. Please continue to check the PGCPS board webpage for more information. And we're going to move to closing remarks from the chair and adjournment. Now that we have come to the last policy and governance meeting for the school year, I personally want to say thank you to everyone for, I mean, this has been it's been a long, intensive, and just, I think, also impactful year. We have moved so many policies across the finish line. We've had so many thoughtful, informative, educational conversations, brought in experts from all different areas of various departments in the school district, as well as all of our constituents who've come in and shared their thoughts. And so I want to say thank you for taking the time, for participating, because we understand that really when we have all of this kind of collective stakeholder engagement, we get really phenomenal outcomes. And I know that my colleagues likely feel that way. I do just want to say a special shout out to our government relations director, Robin Welsh, also to Cindy Adlian, our board office staff, who just constantly are like the masterminds behind everything that we do, from thinking through the policies to developing the logistics of it all. And of course, Mr. Whitley, who brings in that legal expertise on behalf of the law group that he represents, but also I think just the various experiences and expertise that he has. So I want to say thank you to all of you for taking the time. And then of course to our committee members who are here day in and day out. A special shout out to our vice chair, Rivera Forbes, who stepped up to the plate as the student member. As you all may remember, that we had a chair who left mid-year, and that was unexpected for a lot of us. And so she stepped up and she decided to take on a role that, being a student among all the many other kind of competing priorities and applying to college and getting into college and getting scholarship money, is a big thing. And so it's huge. And we're really grateful that we always have active students. And then lastly, but not least, Mr. Fitzpatrick, who is joined us probably quarter into the last end of the year, and has contributed so much. And we're excited to work together more next year on all of this. And so I want to say thank you. Thank you to Mr. Swift for joining us. I know there are probably likely comments. I do really quickly, I think Mr. Swift had a possible question about one of the discussion items. And then I'm sure Vice Chair Rivera Forbes, you want to share some things, and I'll go to Mr. Whitley. So Mr. Swift.
Robin, could you send me some of those items you were talking about, and I'll see how they would fit in that order of business?
I would be glad to.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vice Chair Rivera Forbes.
Hello, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to give a few comments, if that's okay with you, Chair Briggs.
Yep, go for it.
Okay, awesome. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone on here for the amazing year I've had as student member of the board, especially in the Policy and Governance Committee. This was my first pickings when I had the opportunity to look at committee assignments. I knew I wanted to be on P&G because of just how much impact it makes on our school system and how much this was the committee I wanted. And being able to work with Chair Fields in the beginning of the year was nice. It was awesome. But when Chair Briggs stepped up to the plate, it really, really did put P&G on a different level, especially since we got to do so much more and see so many things come and go throughout the year, especially carrying out that work that we started with our first legislative day as well, and then continuing it through. And as Chair Briggs said in his amazing remarks to me, thank you so much. I was very busy this school year with just college and going to senior events and just doing everything to really finish out my senior year. He still did his best as chair and really delivered what had to be done. So I would say, you know, in some ways you did have half a partner at times while I was still being a full-time student. And I'm just so grateful for the work you've done for Prince George's County Public School students, and hearing my voice and hearing other students' voice in your district as well has been greatly appreciated. Ms. Welsh, I have truly enjoyed working with you. You have answered every question under the sun, and I know I've had a million. I know board members have a million, and you go through policies day in and day out, writing day in and day out. And I just appreciate that from you, because I couldn't even imagine how much work it is. But again, just your service to Prince George's County Public Schools and to the students, again, it's so graciously, it's just so appreciated. It's very appreciated. And for Miss Adeline, I have always enjoyed working with you. I really love our board office staff. You are the force of PGCPS, that back burner that really pushes us to where we need to be, making sure we have everything we need for our meetings, making sure our Zoom links are working. We're starting on time, reminding us of our meetings because we have so much on our plate. So sometimes we forget, but you're there to continue supporting us, even with your own lives and your own personal things you deal with as well. So I appreciate you and all your service to Prince George's County Public Schools. And I'm almost done. Mr. Whitley, I have enjoyed working with you as well this year. As you know, I aspire to be a lawyer one day in the future. So just being able to see so many people around me living out the future that I want to have, again, it's something I'm so grateful for. I'm so grateful to have been able to work with you and all your advice you have given to me, and to Mr. Swift as well. Although I haven't talked to you as much throughout the year, all of your expertise and leadership has been greatly appreciated. And all the times you answered my question during board meetings has been appreciated as well. Almost done. Mr. Fitzpatrick, I'm going to give you your flowers at the last board meeting because I do have a little bit to say, but thank you, just to say it here publicly, for joining the board and doing everything you do. And for Chair Mickens Murray, I'm going to give you your flowers as well at the last board meeting, along with board member Miller. So thank you so much, everyone. I've enjoyed serving on the committee this year. I hope you all have an amazing next school year.
Absolutely. And I thought I saw another hand, but I might have made that up.
Yes, Mr. Briggs, my hand was up briefly. I just wanted to make sure, do you want to acknowledge that this will be the last PNG meeting for Dr. Miller and Chair McIntyre?
Yes. I do. And I mean I almost want to echo Rain. I think that this isn't the right platform to acknowledge all the work that you all, not to say that Miss Willie that you're speaking, bringing it up is not apt and necessary, but I do want to say that there's just so much, there's likely way too much to say. And only thing I can say right now is huge gratitude to both of you. I have to give the very separate feedback, but I mean, both powerhouses in your own right. Appreciate everything you've done. I mean, for the board, for our county, I think every person plays a really integral role in moving us forward, and it's necessary that, you know, as a board members, it's a thankless job in a lot of ways. I think really for all of us, not just as board members, for staff members, from everyone who's doing this work, it's a thankless job, you know, and we do a lot of stuff to serve others, and it's so necessary. But I think that unlike teachers, because you can sometimes get you can see the impact that you have on students, right? We don't always get that. We don't always know the stories and the ways that when you showed up to this event, or when you sent that email, or when you addressed that issue, the impact that it had. But it has so much. And so I know that that is the case for sure with you, Chair Mickens Murray and Dr. Miller, and just your service to the school district as a whole, all the years that you've contributed. So I want to say a huge thank you to the both of you for serving. I mean, you got appointed and you could have said no. You could have been like, I'm retired and I'm gonna do my life and just live, right? But you decided to do something that gave back. You didn't have to do this. And so it's appreciated that you've taken the time to do that. Mrs. Walsh.
Well, since we're giving thank yous out, I want to say, first of all, that it has been a great pleasure to have the opportunity to work with you, Chair Briggs. You're a very hardworking person. You pay close attention to detail, and it's just been an excellent opportunity to have this chance to work with you. But I also want to say, as far as the committee has been outstanding. I feel like we've worked really well together and collaborated and came up with some very good policies. And I can't think of anything more important than this policy work for a school system. It is the most important work for the school board. And I felt like this year was really quite exciting when you consider some of the topics that we addressed through policy. So I felt like it was an exciting, fun time with an excellent group of professionals working together to come up with the policies we developed. So thank you all.
Very kind of you. All right, so we're in this love fest, but I do want to say, give also thank yous to our members, to the superintendent and his administration, the board office, the Office of General Counsel, and to everyone who has worked tirelessly around board policies and legislation, including the public, who we don't always see them, but we know that they show up and they care. So the question is on adjourning the June 18, 2024 Policy and Governance meeting. Is there a second?
I second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any objections? Hearing none, the time is now 7:17. The June 18, 2024 Policy and Governance Committee meeting is adjourned. Take care, you all.
Okay, good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Night.